All right, let's go ahead and open up InDesign. When you first open the application, it is going to look familiar to you because it is very similar to the other Adobe applications. Adobe's done a great job at making their interfaces have a similar look and feel. So while their applications are extremely powerful, the fact that they look familiar makes them, I think, a little less intimidating. Let's create a new document. And we have to think about this for a minute. Although you're going to be presenting digitally, at some point you may want to print your book. So we're going to make this a regular print document. So let's go to print. Now I want it to have a certain presence when it's printed. That means I want it to be fairly large. So I'm going to make each page a tabloid page. I'm going to make it landscape. It's going to be facing pages. I know I'm going to have at least 13 pages. I also know that I'm going to have bleed. Many of my pages have ink that goes all the way to the edge, which means it has to actually extend beyond the trim in order for it to print properly and make sure there's no problems during the trimming process. So down under the print and slug area, I'm going to give myself 1.25 inches of bleed. I'll click the little chain link here and that will make the bleed the same on the top, bottom, and sides. Now a slug is not something we're going to use in this particular document. It is an area outside the trim where you can put special information, notes to the printer, notes to yourself or to the client. Very often there will be a slug at the bottom of the document that will have a legend that includes your logo, the date, the client, and a brief description of the job. Let's go ahead and press create. And before we do anything else, let's go up to the window workspace and make sure we are all using the essential workspace. And also under view, go to display performance and make sure high quality display is selected. Having a book with pages that are 17 wide and 11 tall, that makes for a fairly large book, and it may actually be too large to be practical. But I like the aspect ratio in any case. So even if I were to make it smaller, I'd like to keep this aspect ratio. And I encourage you to try different aspect ratios for your own book. Maybe a square, maybe something very vertical. What goes with your look and feel? And by look and feel, I mean the look and feel of your ad or your PSA. Your book should have a similar look and feel so that your presentation is consistent. So try anything except 8.5 by 11. Okay, so what I'm going to do is walk you through the creation of my process book. And along the way, I think you're going to learn a lot of the fundamentals of InDesign. And when you're done, hopefully you'll be able to create your own process book using this extremely valuable program. Photoshop and Illustrator are essential to have in your repertoire, but I think InDesign is just about as important. It's going to be very useful to you in the long run. Not only can it be used for print documents, but it can be used for interactive documents as well. Everything in InDesign has to live or exist inside a container. So for example, if we wanted to put type on our page, you could select the type tool and then you'd have to define an area. You could just start typing. It's often very helpful when you're designing your pages to use placeholder text. So go up to type, fill with placeholder text. I'll just do a select all. And over here in the properties panel, you can choose your font. I'm going to go with Avenir. I'll use Avenir Light. Now I don't want the TT, that's true type. What I want is regular Avenir because I don't have the true type loaded. We could establish the point size and the leading, and all of this should look very familiar to you from Photoshop and Illustrator. We could also make this type justified down here in the paragraph panel by just clicking one of the justified icons. You can access additional character information by clicking the three dots, same as in Illustrator. So as you can see, there is a lot of similarity between Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign. You can also create a text box by using the frame tools. So we have a rectangle, an ellipse, and a polygon, or the regular shape tools, which is the rectangle, the ellipse, and the polygon. Now the only difference between these two tools is that the frame tool actually puts an X through the frame. So that's very handy when you're doing a layout and you don't have your images and everything yet, but you want to start planning where everything goes. Having a box that has the X through it will indicate that this is going to be a graphic or an image. But you can turn either one of these into a graphics container or a type container. So I'm just going to take the rectangle tool and click and drag, and then select the type tool, click on it, and again, I could add a placeholder text, and it basically behaves exactly like a text box. It is a text box. I'm going to delete this one. You can also have text inside a shape. So I will use the frame tool now. And again, I'll hold, if I want to drag out from the center, I hold down the Option, and then I'll hold the Shift to constrain proportions. Take the type tool, click on the shape, and then if I do a fill with placeholder text, so this is just like the area type tool in Illustrator. You could start by creating a frame, either using either one of these tools, and I'll just draw out a graphics box here. And then I'm going to go to Place, going into my process book, my assets for the process book. In this case, let's go into Photoshoot and choose one of these images, and I'll say OK, and it places it in the frame. Now if you roll over the image, you're going to see this circle here. This is called the content grabber, and this allows you to move the image around inside its container. So when I click on it, you can see out here, this is actually the full extent of the image. And if I click here, I can reposition it. Now there's an important feature called fitting. So if I want this image to be as large as possible and fit inside this container, I will use one of these fitting options over here in the Properties panel. This first one will fill frame proportionally. So if I click on that, it will fill the entire frame and keep your image proportional. If I choose the second one, it will fit the content proportionally, but not necessarily have it fit the full frame. So here's my frame up here and down here. So the entire content is now showing, but it doesn't really fill the whole frame. You have this one, which will fit content to frame, but that will distort the image. Fit frame to content, that will change your frame to match the aspect ratio of your content. Let's create another one. Now let's use a different technique. We're not going to create the box ahead of time. Let's go up and just do the place command, and I will choose this image. Click open. But you see what happened? I still had that other container, the other frame selected. So it automatically replaced the image in that frame with my new image. That was not what I wanted, so I'm going to do a Command Z. And with this new image attached to my cursor, I'm going to click and drag, and it's going to create a frame that is proportional to the image. And when I release, it's going to fit the image to that new container. So this is a very handy way to do it. Let me go through that again. Just going to go up here and do a place. I'll choose a different one. Click and drag. And you see, I can't change the aspect ratio. It's going to keep the aspect ratio the same as the original photograph. Okay, now let's choose the selection tool and click off the image to deselect it. Now this is where InDesign gets a little confusing. If I come back and I click on the image and I want to resize it, in Photoshop or Illustrator, you just simply drag on a corner and you'd resize it. But what happens here is you're just resizing the frame and not the content. And that can be very frustrating. If you click on the content grabber first and then drag from the corner, it will then size the content but not the frame. So what you can do is select the frame, press E, and then hold down your Shift key, and that will scale both the container and the image. E is the free transform tool, right over here. Go back to my selection tool and deselect. Okay, now let's select all of these and delete them. One of the things I like best about InDesign is the ability to create master pages. A master page is kind of like a template. Anything you put on the master page will show up on the pages of your document. Use master pages for anything you want to appear on all or most of your pages, or create different styles of pages that you plan to repeat throughout your book. Every document has at least one master page. This document has a right and left-hand page, so there is a left and right-hand master page. I'm going to use master pages to establish my grid using guides. I'll also place headers and page number. First thing I'm going to do is reset my workspace. Here's my Pages panel. I'm going to pull that out and keep it open. And I access the master pages by clicking up in this area right here. So if I double click on this, I'm now inside my master pages. Anything that I create in here will appear down here in my document. I'm going to zoom out a little bit by pressing Command minus. Now the way I'm going to create my grid is I'm going to take my rectangle frame tool, and we'll do each page individually. So that creates an X across the page. Make sure your rulers are showing by pressing Command R, and then just click on the ruler and drag, and you can bring a guide over and place it in the center of your document. I'm going to bring a guide down from the top, and if I hold down the Command key, that guide will go across both pages, and so that'll save me a little bit of time. Selection tool, and resize the frame so it is now half of the page. And again, I will drag a guide over to the center there. I'll move this one back over to the other side and drag a guide over there. Okay, now I'm going to center this a little bit, move this one up, and now do the horizontal guide. Hold down the Command key. Move this back down here, and do another one down here. Just use my space bar, move over to this side. Center. Now I get rid of the frame. And if I were to click down here on these pages, you're going to see every page now has the guides. So that's going to be very, very useful as I lay out my grid design. Alright, so now I'm also going to put a header on each page. And my header is just going to consist of a red line. So I'll draw my line, something like that. And one of the beauties of master pages is I can go back later and say I want to modify the header. All I have to do is modify it on the master page, and then it gets modified everywhere in the document. So if this line is too thick or needs to be a different color, I can easily change it later. For now, I'm just going to make it red, and I'll make it 2 points. And I'm going to put in a text box here, and I'll just type in, this is going to be all uppercase, page. So this is just placeholder. You could also just put in placeholder text. I am going to style it with my Avenir, and I'm going to increase the size to 14. The color, I don't want it to be actually full-on black. I want it to be a shade of gray. So I'm going to change this to, I think, 45. And I'm going to move it down so that it's more centered. And maybe over a little closer to the line. I'm going to zoom in close and make sure it is in fact centered. To do that, I'm just simply going to use the rectangle tool and measure here this way and check it here. So obviously I have to go down a little bit. There we go. Now I'm going to zoom out. This is going to go on my other page as well. So I can just select it, hold down the Option and the Shift, and drag it over to the other page. Now if we go down here, you can see we've got it throughout our document. Now I'm not sure I want page numbers on this, but I'm going to show you how you can do page numbers. To have automatic page numbering, we have to insert a special character on the master pages. So I'm going to zoom in here, and in this corner, create a text box, and then I'm going to go up to Type, Insert, Special Character, Markers, Current Page Number. It just gives you the letter A. There's really no number, but this is coded so that when it appears in the document, it will actually be a number, and it will change if you add pages or delete pages. So I'm going to go ahead and style it with the Avenir, and I will move it down so that it's right in that corner. I'm going to copy it and move on over to the other page, paste it, bring it down. Now, and on this page, I want it to be flush right or aligned right. So Command Shift R, and then position it correctly. There we go. Now if I go look at my document, I have page numbers. It is counting the cover as page 1 in this case. All right, let's start actually building our document. If you press Command 0, it will fit the page to the window. You can use your hand tool and move it around. Navigate. You could also just double click in the page panel and it will take you to that page. So this is my cover page. Now in this case, I don't want this to be up here. This is the cover page that I want. Okay, so I'm going to go back over here. When we have a master item on a page in our main document, you can't automatically select it. It's protected so that you can't mess it up. But if you press the Command and Shift key, then you can select it. And in this case, I will just delete this one. I am going to keep this, but I'm not going to keep it in this position. So I will Command click on this, and I'm going to move it. Probably going to be over here somewhere. I'll just move it over here for right now. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit, Command minus, and I'm going to put a black background on this page, so I could use either one of these tools. And I do want to zoom in because I want to show you I have to go to bleed, There's my bleed. The red line is my bleed. So I have to go make sure I go out to bleed. And in my properties panel, I will fill it with black. I want to make sure it's in the back, so arrange, send to back, or Command Shift left square bracket pushes it to the back. Let's just zoom in here. I'm holding the Command spacebar. I want to make sure I'm going out to bleed. I am not. That needs to go out a little bit farther. So pull that out there and up there. Now you can always go far. If you go out and then come back, sometimes it works better. And you can always go farther on the bleed because that's going to be trimmed off, but you don't want to go less than the bleed. Okay, now I want the name of my product, in this case my company, Etienne Marcel. So I'm going to create a text box right here. So this is going to be centered on the page, so it's going to straddle my grid in this case. So this will be all uppercase, Etienne Marcel. I will select it, click on my type fill, change this to white. It needs to be scaled way up. I am going to change the fonts. Now at first it's going to be, the first part of it's going to be light, and then the second part is going to be black, heavy. I want it to be larger, so I can just select it, Command Shift greater than brackets. I have to open up the text box. I'm going to zoom out to see what the page looks like. If you hit W, that will show you the page without the bleed or the guides. So I think that size is about right. Let me check my other document. Okay, it looks about right. Now I don't want it to be a bright white. I'm going for something very subtle and chic. So I'm going to lower the opacity down to 30%. Say OK. I'm going to bring my line down and get it in the proper relationship to the title. Now I know I'm going to put in some other items in here. Make this a little bit longer. You can see my Smart Guide tells me where the middle of that text is, right there. Now I want these two to be grouped together so I can move them together. It does need to be moved over. Now in the book I created previously, I added this little element. So in this case, I think I will omit that, and I went to the direct selection tool, so I'm just going to move this over a little bit. I am going to put my name, and I will change this to white for now. DD1. Final project. Process book. I'll change it to the Avenir Light. Now I want this to be bigger. I could just scale it up, but I want it to be exactly the same height as this type here. So this is where I'm going to use the free transform. I'll press E and then hold the Shift key and drag from a corner and get that till it's exactly the same height as my type. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'll move this over to this side, and I'll change this to 30. All right, now before I group these, I want to make this box as narrow as possible. And I'll show you why here in just a second. So that's about it right there. Now I can select both of these and group them, and then I can use this to indicate where the center is. I want this right in the center, both horizontally and vertically. There we go. Hit W. Let's zoom out and see what that looks like. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, let's move down to the research page and get some practice placing images. This is what I want the research page to look like. So these are examples of ads that I thought would be appropriate. So this is like a mood board. I want these to be the aspect ratio of 8.5 by 11, and this the aspect ratio of 17 by 11. So let's go back over here and zoom in. I'm going to hit W. Move this guy out of the way here. Hit W so I can see my guides. I'm going to Command-Shift-Click on my header so that I can rename it. And I will rename it Research. And now let's start setting up our configuration. I'm going to use the rectangle frame tool. I'm going to click and change this to 8.5 inch by 11 inch. And say OK. Now I want to scale this down. So I'm going to hold down the Option and the Shift key and scale this down. Move it up. All right. Now if I look at this one, I am going to need to have a little space between all of these. So I think this might work. I'm going to give this a fill color just so that I can see it. And hold down the Option and Shift and drag it to the right. And I'll do it again. I'll do it again. Okay, I want to make sure these are all distributed equally so that I have the same space between them. So I'm going to select them all. I'll go up to Window, Object and Layout, Align. Then I go down to the Distribute Objects area. Over here, if you roll over it, it'll say Distribute Horizontal Centers. So I'll click that, and that will adjust them if necessary. I'll close that up. Okay, then I'm going to take my rectangle frame tool again, and I'll make this one 17 inches by 11 inches. And I'll fill it with black so I can see it. I'll scale it down, hold the Shift key. I want it to be the same width as two of these. I'll scale it over to here. I'm going to bump it up because I want it to fit inside my grid. Hold down the Option key and copy it over to this side. Okay, now we can start placing our images. I'll select the first frame and go to Place or Command D. Now I'm going to go into my assets for the process book, into Research, and I'll just randomly select these. It needs to fit in there, so I'll go to my Fitting. Again, Command D, and choose this one. fit it. Okay, so now this has two images in here, and I just want one to show at a time. I'll use the content grabber and slide this over. I can put the next one over here. I want to look at these this way. Okay, we can take that one and make it fit. All right, these will be our spread versions. This one. Hit W. And there we go. Okay, I want to walk you through one more page, and that's the introduction page. That one faces the research page. So let's move this on over here, and let's look at the finished book. So this is what I've got in mind for this page. All right, so I'm going to go back here. Now the first thing I notice is this looks a little small to me. I was thinking it looks small over here as well. So before I overwrite it and change the copy, I'm going to go to my master page, and I will select it, and in my properties panel I'm going to change it to 22 point. And then I think I'm going to have to move it up a couple notches. I'm going to go ahead and change this side as well. Save it, go back into my page, and now this is updated. This one has not. I've already overridden the master page, so this one I will have to change manually on this one page. So I'll come in here and change this one to 22. And then move it up a notch. Okay. All right, I think that's better. Now we can override it. Command Shift click, take your type tool, rename this one Introduction, and delete the rest of it. I know I'm going to want this one to come forward, so I will override the master page. All right, now I want to put the black background in, so I could select this background, and if it's locked, just go up to Object, Unlock All on Spread, and I'm just going to Option and drag it over. I have to make sure it aligns with the fold, the gutter here, and that it goes out to bleed. So I'm going to hit W, use my arrows to adjust it, make sure I'm at bleed. I do want it to go into the back. We go up here, Arrange, send to back, Command left bracket. There we go. We also need to release the red line. I'm going to move this out of the way for a moment and Command Shift click on the red line, then bring it to the front. Okay, then I'll move my black background back up. It needs to go into the back. There we go. Let's make sure that it's on the bleeds. Hit W. Okay, I want to make sure I've spelled it correctly, so I'll just select the whole thing, go up to Edit, and Spelling, check Spelling, and it's not showing up, so that means it's okay. All right. W, so I can see my grid. Open up the gradient. It's under Color, Gradient, and then just click the gradient bar. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I want the gradient going the opposite way, so I can just click here. I don't want it so bright, so I'm going to lower the opacity down probably to about 45. And hit W. I think that looks pretty good. All right, now let's put in our text box. I'll drag a guide over to align it with introduction. This is part of our grid method. We want to align things exactly. And I'll take my type tool, put in my text. I want this text also to be 22, but I'm going to put it in a light font. So I'm going to fill it with placeholder text for now. Select all. I need to change the value of the text, so I could either change it to white and lower the opacity, or I could click on the fill for the type and lower the tint. So I'm just going to lower the tint to 45, I think. And see how that looks. Change this to 22 and change it to Avenir. And I think it'll look good if I just open up the leading a little bit. So I'm going to hold down the Option key and hit my down arrow. I think that looks good. Now W to check it out. Maybe this font needs to be a little bit lighter. Let's see what this one is at. So I go to the fill. Well, this fills at 45. This is also black at 45. Okay. Now let's say I want to end my text here and get rid of all of the overset copy. What you can do is Command, Shift, down arrow, and then delete. So what that does is it'll select the next paragraph. So if there were several paragraphs in there, I have to do it for each paragraph. Okay, so now the other thing is I want to deviate from my style a little bit and bring my introduction and my red line down into this gray area, because I want to put the very large oversized type up in here. So I'm going to select both of these and then drag them down to here. I want to see my grid. Ideally it would be like a proportion of the grid, so maybe halfway, like that. I have to make sure that this gradient is not on top of my color bar, so I will go up, arrange, and send it backward. I could also select the red and bring that forward. Alright, now I'm going to put my large type in, put a box up here on top, and this is going to be very large, so I'm just going to start out with it like at 72. It's going to go bigger than that. HN. This will be Avenir Light, and I need it much bigger. So scale it up. I'm holding the Command Shift and greater than right angle bracket. Let's see how that's looking. Okay, so now the type has to be lighter. So I will try the 45 and see how that looks. Okay, that's going to be way too bright. I think in this case I'll just lower the opacity here so that I can see what it looks like. I think 20% is about right. Now I want this to bleed. I want it to just touch my gray rectangle, and I want it to bleed off the sides, or nearly bleed off the sides. I'm going to select it, hold down the Option key, and move it to the bottom. I will rename it Marcel. This font has to change to the heavy font, the black. And let's see what that looks like. I'm going to move it up right to bump up against the gray bar. So what I'm going to do is outline the type. Create outlines. And I'll just select this segment here and pull it over. Same thing up here. This one actually is not going over, so I think I'll be okay with that one. And there we go. I'm going to delete this number. I think that's basically all you need to know in order to create your process book. Now let's look at my finished process book and look at some of the things I did. Okay, so here's an example of a type exploration page. So what I've done is look at different typefaces, and then I've written a little explanation down here. Avenir's clean lines and contemporary feel I think will work well. There are also many weights available which give me design options. So I'm going to go with the Avenir. I'm using the large oversized type again on this page to add interest and to make it less expected. And then this caption really is notes I got during the critique and so forth. This one I might want to move over to this side and make it flush right. I think that looks better and it's more consistent with that one. Then this is my final spread, the approved spread, and here is an explanation of what I did to resolve it.